Well, speaking of dark things and dark sides, we have a massive diesel fuel shortage coming up here, folks. We did cover this the other day where we talked about, heck, in 25 days, we're virtually going to be out of diesel oil. And I kind of blew it off. Some of you did ask in the comments, well, what's going to happen? And I said, hey, gas prices are going to go up. Diesel prices are going to go up. Now, if you recall, diesel used to be cheaper than unleaded or the cheap stuff. Okay, however you want to call it. I don't know what you guys call it in other states. The unleaded used to be more expensive virtually than diesel. It's not that way anymore. You have a massive issue coming up here, and John Kirby was asked by a reporter in the White House what he thought of it. He didn't even have a clue that it was going to happen. It was news to him that we're going to run out of diesel. I mean, hell, how do you think people get their energy on the East Coast, at least some of them? Diesel. How do you think our freight gets around? Diesel. So what do you think happens if we don't have any more diesel? Do you think the demand for diesel is going to go up because we don't have that much, which is going to cause the prices to freaking skyrocket? Well, they already have, folks, and we got video clips for you galore here today. If you haven't already hit the like and subscribe button, do so now. We would appreciate your support. It says here, be prepared to spend even more on consumer goods because of diesel fuel shortage in southeastern United States. It's not just southeastern, so don't be fooled by this specific article. This specific article is for southeastern states. It's going to hit us here in the West Coast, and boy, oh boy, is it going to shellac everybody. The shortage is caused in large part by routine refinery maintenance this time of year and refineries competing with households using more energy to heat their homes. I think this is quite honestly a little bit of BS because the refinery maintenance comes up every now and then, and we know kind of when that maintenance is going to occur because it usually occurs year after year. But also, it's not that we're using more energy than years previous based on the climate that's going on. So I think basically they're trying to cover for the Biden administration on this in terms of fuel prices and trying to say, oh, well, it's refinery problems. The reason why I know this is because they do the same thing in California here. We pay the highest in gas all across the 50 union or the 50 states, the other 49 states. We pay more than anybody else, okay? Virtually other than maybe Pennsylvania. And they're blaming, oh, well, it's just because the refineries are down due to maintenance. Well, it's also because we used to have 50 refineries and now we have 15 or 16 that's down due to maintenance because nobody wants to do business in your states because you want to shellac them. You want to virtually put them out of business, which Peter Doocy called out in Karine Jean-Pierre and said, hey, you know what? What are you going to do because you virtually want to put these oil companies out of business? She goes, well, why would you say that? Why do we want to put them out of business? And we did a whole montage of Joe Biden during the campaign trail saying that he literally wants to remove fossil fuel, that he wants to get rid of the fossil fuel industry. So why would the fossil fuel companies want to take out more permits, utilize those permits, and put that type of investment down into whatever it is they need to do to start drilling when you know that you have an administration that just wants to shellac you, wants to remove all your profits, wants to do away with you, wants to put all of this money into renewable energy rather than invest it into fossil fuels that's going to help kickstart our economy and make things better. So we're not paying as much at the fuel pump. So we're not paying as much when we freaking pay our energy bill, or we're not paying as much when we go to the grocery store for consumer goods, but they're going to say, it's all due to maintenance. It's all due because people are heating up their homes. It's not even that cold yet, okay? It's not that cold. It's going to get way colder. So if we're talking about things are bad now, wait till people really start lighting up their homes. North Carolina State University professor Michael Walden said both refineries and energy companies use the same molecular makeup that creates further competition for a valuable ingredient. Demand for that goes up in the winter. And so that sort of competes with diesel fuel. But diesel fuel is 25 days out from being freaking gone. So what's going on there? It hasn't hit the coldest part yet, folks. So who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be some apocalyptic stuff here going on. The impact can be felt by consumers across the country because the big rig trucking industry heavily relies on diesel fuel in its trucks. The increase in basically diesel price specifically, which is currently at $5.30 per gallon, is passed on to consumers so companies can remain profitable. Oh, goody, goody. Well, we have a clip here of all this from the news. Let's go ahead and roll it.
I'll let you know. First off, I spoke with an economist and a couple of truck drivers today, and they say that there's simply no way around it, that we're all going to feel this shortage in some form or fashion. Stephen Kelly has been a truck driver for more than 30 years now.
5 million plus miles and counting.
Throughout the past 3 decades, he's seen it all, and now having to roll with the flow of a diesel shortage.
Before, when it was only like $3, now it's $5.
The average cost for a gallon of diesel, $5.30.
We used to have $1,000 to get fuel. Every 24-hour period, they had to move that up to $1,500.
The shortage caused in large part due to refinery maintenance this time of year and an unlikely source.
The reason is that diesel fuel, in terms of its refinement from oil, competes directly with home heating oil. Demand for that goes up in the winter, and so that sort of pushes out or competes with diesel fuel.
In the end, that increase in
Look, if that was the case, and I do 100% agree with him to some extent, if it is the case, fully what he's talking about, we would see this type of shortage literally every year. Like, this would be a very common thing. We're about to hit nothing, like no supply whatsoever. So what is he talking about? Like, it's due to maintenance. It's due because we're competing with home energy prices and home energy oil because they utilize diesel. Folks, does that make sense to you? Does that really seem like that's the underlying issue here? Or is it that we just don't have oil and fuel because the Biden administration doesn't want to drill? They can't get oil from Saudi Arabia virtually because Saudi Arabia's getting the middle finger and talking crap behind Joe Biden's back. They're asking Venezuela for oil rather than freaking just doing it here. They don't want to. So now we're all gonna get screwed. Happy holidays, folks. Christmas is coming early.
cost is passed on to consumers.
Now, if you go coast to coast, like when I run the coast, I fuel 6 times, 3 on the way out and 3 on the way back. That's like $6,000 just in fuel. That's not paying the driver, you know. So that cost has got to go somewhere, you know. And that's people who shop in the stores and so on.
Consumers are feeling it, and so are newcomers into the industry.
They're telling everybody that's coming in, be your own boss, be independent, buy a truck. And it's really hard these days because of that, because of fuel.
And for one truck driver who did not want his face to be shown, there's one way to put it.
How the industry is going right now, you know, it's ridiculous. It's just like, what do you do? You know, do you just continue to put less fuel in, or, you know, what do you do? You know, there's nothing really you can do.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really you can do until you freaking increase the supply of oil. But Joe Biden, guys, he says he's doing everything he can. Don't you trust Joe Biden? He's doing everything he possibly can. He's losing sleep over it. 2 years in, and you're still paying up the wazoo for gas. But it's all Putin's fault. And if it's not Putin's fault, it's the Republicans' fault, according to the Biden White House. Well, this continues on Fox Business with another trucking company spending an extra $70,000 a week for diesel. Let's go ahead and hear their story.
Bart Plaskoff is the president of Summit Trucking in Dallas, and he joins me now. Bart, you're not passing along the costs of higher diesel, and you're not laying people off. We understand this. But you're paying what, an extra $70,000 a week for diesel? That's not sustainable. How much longer can you absorb these higher costs?
Stuart, thanks for having me. Last year we were paying on average about $2.60 a gallon. Right now it's about $5.50 a gallon. I learned early on in my career you had to save for a rainy day. That rainy day is upon us. We're able to pass along some of the higher costs in a fuel surcharge to our customers, but ultimately the consumer.
So it is getting passed on.
How much longer, though, can you absorb these costs? Surely at some point you've just got to pass them on or go out of business.
Well, we are passing them on in a fuel surcharge to our customers, but again, I've saved for these rainy days. Who's getting hurt are the smaller guys, the independent contractors, the guys that have 1 to 10 trucks. Those are the guys that are really hurting. And those are the guys we're trying to help when they're looking for jobs right now.
How much do your drivers make? Can you tell me that?
You know, a good driver can make anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 a year, depending on how long he's on the road. He can be on the road for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Those guys make more money. But again, the higher fuel costs are hurting the smaller guys, the independent contractors, the guys that have 1 to 10 trucks. I'm able to negotiate a fuel discount with the larger truck stop chains. That helps me offset these higher costs. And again, you have to save for these rainy days. Trucking is a very cyclical business, and we're prepared for these times. Margins are thin, but we'll make it through it. It's the smaller guys you got to help.
Do you know of small?
I'm going to pause it there. They go on a little bit longer, but there's actually a really great point that they're making here of it's the smaller guys that are getting screwed. And this is kind of an economic fallacy in a way of a lot of times government or regulation, they'll put something in place and always look at that 20% of businesses. And if you look at small businesses, they make up roughly 80% of businesses just in general. And I believe it's 20 employees or less that make up a small business. So when you increase, say, minimum wage, for example, yeah, those 20% of companies or the top 10% can eat those costs, because of the business that's coming in. But who gets screwed is the mom and pop shops, the small businesses. In the same way here, when you have gas prices going through the roof, yeah, he can eat it. He gets a discount on maybe wholesale with the supplier or the middleman that he's getting diesel from, or he's getting certain contracts from, or at the same time, he's able to pass it on to his customer by doing a surcharge, and his customer is willing to pay for it, as well as a rainy day because he was able to save up. So looking at the small guy, the guys that have 10 trucks or less are completely getting shellacked here because they don't have the type of margins that maybe this gentleman has here because they're a small business. You have some people who that's just their one truck, and they're trying to make ends meet here, and they're getting shellacked, and it's going to get worse, folks. Again, there's nothing that's going to say that this is going to get better. I think we need to understand that, is that the supply is there for 25 days. As far as what I'm reading, there's nothing that say that supply is going to increase. So you're going to see diesel go through the roof. It has to get passed on to the consumer. It's not every business is going to be like this guy that's just going to eat these freaking costs. Like, it's crazy that this guy's going to sit there and eat those costs. Go, oh, it's a rainy day. I'd be curious of how much of that cost he's actually eating himself. I don't think it's going to be that much, and I could be wrong. I think he's passing a lot of this down onto the consumers with that fuel surcharge. But boy, oh boy, are people getting shellacked, and they're going to show up at the polls. The blue collar, the white collar workers are all going to show up and vote red because we want to increase domestic oil production. We don't want to go to Venezuela for oil. We don't want to go to Saudi Arabia for oil. We can do it here, and we just don't do it. I'm not saying we can't go to Saudi Arabia. I'm not saying we can't go to Venezuela. But hell, if you just start doing it here, it's going to open up a lot of pathways. When energy's up 30, 34%, it's going to help out a lot when you got your own diesel here in America. But that's the Biden administration. They have it all figured out, you guys. If they haven't figured out in 2 freaking years, do you think they're going to figure out in the next 2 years? No, they're not. They're lying to all of you. He's doing everything he can. Everything he can. BS. BS, 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 and Americans see it. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.